Get value for your tax dollar. Use them on vacation. Okay, so this next issue is transportation. And to be quite honest, I invited quite a few people to try to come to this, and only one gentleman was nice. I actually even physically harassed a few. I would have liked there because at least one of them I wanted to get here has different views than yourself, I would say is a safe way of saying it. And I think that's good. It wouldn't have been a debate. It would have still been, here's my view, here's your view. Getting mind camp. Can I get someone to please get the door? Because I knew this would happen, but I'm doing it. So Representative Doug Ericson's going to give a little brief bio about himself. He has a whole wide variety of ideas. I put maglev train on there because, well, I knew that would get you guys get, especially when we were first going up against the iPhone. I had to do what I could. I was going to go dance or Doug will get mad. But
in the future, we'll all drive around in iPhones.
Maglev iPhone.
Maglev iPhones. Okay. With that, I'm already losing it, so I'm going to hand it over to Representative. One thing I do ask you, for those who are new, for this thing, if you're interested in talking, signal for us to get the mic, because we're trying to get this recorded. These will be available on the net. We want people who couldn't attend. Some people paid for the conference and realized, oh, it's 4th of July weekend. I'm not going to be able to come. I don't know why. We'll never do this weekend again, but with no further ado, Representative Doug Erickson.
Great, thank you so much. It's a nice informal conversation using a microphone, which is great. It's good to be here.
Oxymoron, jumbo shrimp.
Exactly. Well, I'm Doug Erickson. I've been state legislature for 10 years. I've been the ranking Republican on transportation. We did the nickel package. Been the floor leader for our side. Now I'm currently the deputy leader for the House Republican Caucus, which is our number 2 position. I represent Whatcom County in the legislature, which is the northernmost county. So I got 5 international border crossings with Canada. It's a great place. It's a great job. You were talking about going full-time. I'd hate to go full-time in the legislature. I think having part-time is very good. I'd like to see our pay cut in half and go every other year, actually. I think it might be a better way in some ways for this job. But today, transportation, my directions were to talk about something very briefly and just kind of throw it up for conversation. And so the item I'd like to touch on briefly is just maglev. For the past 6 years, I've been running legislation in Olympia to try and introduce the concept of a different mode of transportation in Washington State, basically maglev train. So first question, has anybody actually been on the maglev train? Is anybody familiar with the maglev train in Shanghai? The only operating facility right now is the Transrapid facility in Shanghai, connecting the downtown to the airport. It goes about 300 miles an hour. If you watch the video clip on Transrapid's webpage, they show you the actual speedometer clicking along as they get it up to speed. Phenomenal technology, and we think we have the ability to upgrade that technology to the next level with regards to how you use magnets and how you actually energize the system to move people and trains throughout the region. Why I think this is going to start coming perhaps into more attention in Washington State is, and one more question for the jury out here, anybody know the single biggest point of CO2 emissions in Washington State? The single biggest point? Yes, sir. Mount well, besides Mount St. Helens, the ones that we have something to do with.
Cows.
Not even cows. What? Not even tailpipes. Not even Microsoft can't. Imagine some way, in some fashion, that they are responsible for it. But it's SeaTac Airport. It is the single biggest point of CO2 emissions in Washington State. So if you really want to start talking about CO2, I have a theory which says I want to be able to put in place a train system that replaces the mid-range airplane. And so whenever I talk to any group, whether it's conservative, whether it's liberal, moderate, whatever the group may be, pro-tax, anti-tax, I don't care, when you ask them the question, if you live in the outlying regions around Washington State, other than Bellingham or Ferndale actually, if I could be on a train, go to a Mariners game, be there in 30 minutes, and take the train back the same night, wouldn't I do that? And everybody's, yeah, of course I would rather take that. We get caught up in this concept, and I say, well, currently you have Amtrak, and for me to take Amtrak to go to a Mariners game starting in Bellingham, I have to leave the night before to get to the game in time to be able to get back, basically, is where it's at. Commuting to Olympia, I have to leave on Sunday to get to Olympia for a meeting at 10 or at noon on Monday morning in Olympia. So there's just no option right now to the automobile, really, that's convenient and moves you around. So my theory is, why not work on a fashion we can actually beat the automobile with something more convenient, more cost-effective, and put in place a system. We've been working with scientists out of MIT, the Volpe Institute back east. We've had scientists from back there who actually came in with an ingenious concept, and I'll just end on this really quick, is connecting SeaTac Airport with Payne Field up in Everett with McCord Air Force Base. And when you go to SeaTac right now, you currently get onto a little shuttle that takes you to the north satellite or the south satellite. But what if we turn Payne Field into the north satellite, McCord into the south satellite, and connected that with high-speed trains to build the trunk line and built in a guaranteed ridership onto the system, and you build off of that to connect to the rest of Washington State with options on airline travel. So don't get mad at me if anybody's from Everett here who doesn't want their Payne Field to become a commercial airport center. That's not the issue. It's how we connect these things together and build in place a real option that's feasible, can happen. The new system out there that we've been talking about quite a bit is the system they're currently working on down in California on maglev trains to actually one-up the technology that they're currently using through Transrapid. So I think there's great potential if we can change our regulatory system, our permitting system, our way of doing business in the state legislature to actually look at options on ways to give people a better choice in their automobile. And with that, we can just move on to conversation about any transportation issue you guys want to talk about, whether it's 520, the viaduct, maglev, whatever it is.
You're second. He's first. I saw him first. Sorry. You're third.
What is the shortest distance the maglite train would be feasible to operate under? 10 miles, 20 miles, 50 miles?
There's, actually, let's see. Testing. Okay, we're good.
Want me just to use that one?
You're going to be permanently white.
There we go.
This will make it easier for me now.
Yeah. Now, does that work? Is that pull up closer? The really, the two different types of technology that we've been talking about. In the bills that we've been running, actually, it's been me and Mary Lou Dickerson. Does anybody know Mary Lou Dickerson? Does anybody's represented Mary Lou? Mary Lou and I, on certain issues, are considered polar opposites, but we've come together to work on this issue. And the bills that we've introduced, there's been two different types of things. One's been the maglev trains, basically the inter-city, inter-region connectors. And the second one has been what they call the personal rapid transit, the PRT systems. And the PRT systems are geared towards serving a city with trains that hold between 4 and 6 people, for example, that serve you as you on a demand basis. So that distance there that's feasible is any distance. If we start looking at the train from basically Vancouver, BC to Portland, Oregon, to get from Bellingham to Mount Vernon, that becomes feasible. And if you work on the new technology, instead of having the big train connecting that holds 300 people, if you look at on individual computerized train systems with each train holding maybe 50 people that can be connected to up it, all of a sudden you have the express. You can call up trains. You could be serving Mount Vernon and Seattle at the same time with trains on the same trunk line. And so really, the distance, once you get this thing built, I think could serve, you know, like from Linwood to Everett, you know, 15-mile jumps would be feasible to be working for people to commute and also to go and do different things.
Okay, so with the example that you just gave earlier, you know, let's see, the going down to from Bellingham to Mariners game takes 2 days. You know, it strikes me that implementing an entire 300-mile-per-hour maglev to, you know, solve that problem sounds a little ridiculous when we already have, say, Amtrak. You know, when it's a scheduling issue. It's not a we need a 300-mile-per-hour train to do this. It sounds like a lot of what you're describing could be implemented with the, you know, the only major difference of not having a very cool maglev train, which, as a geek, I definitely appreciate that. But you know, for implementing that, you could just basically use the existing lines that we already have and just layer like new scheduling on them for like the smallest fraction of the costs. Not to put down a maglev train.
No, not at all. Well, here's the trick, though. We don't have a line. You don't have a line. Amtrak doesn't have. Burlington Northern owns the entire, it's BNSF or Union Pacific owns the tracks, and they lease it to the state. And so they have priority over all track alignments. And if you look at the stats coming up into the future, those tracks are not going to get less crowded with BN trains. They're going to get more crowded with BN trains. This stuff keeps flowing through. The other issue on the BN tracks is they don't always take you where the people want to go. When we do the studies on where people want to go from point to point, you have to have a different way to move them around. So you have scheduling problems, you have huge capacity problems, you have a lack of ability to expand the current line through key choke points, and we are working on it with Amtrak and spending incredible amounts of money on it right now, particularly from Seattle to Portland, to take out the choke points to make the trip faster. With maglev trains, if you look at the cost of, you know, based upon our studies, you know, there's nothing on the ground that we can go out and say, here's the example of what we would actually like to build, because the Shanghai line is incredibly expensive, the way they built that one. But there's new technology where we can actually have it more mobile. We held a conference, 5-6 years ago when I was ranking Republican on transportation. We brought in the Innovative Transportation Solution Group, and we brought in people from all over the West Coast really to come and talk about different ways of doing it. And one of the concepts is to you can actually build the system suspending tracks on poles that really are not that much wider than 2 telephone poles together. So you have flexibility and the ability to move it around at a very low cost with right-of-way. So, and again, it's trying to beat the automobile. You know, the automobile is the single most cost-effective, efficient way to get between 2 different places. And it's a way of how I beat that. So to take the trains up to speed, to be able to make my commute from Bellingham to Seattle or Seattle to Spokane or Spokane to Portland time effective, very difficult to do it on the existing right-of-way tracks.
But there's the cost risk of using, say, effectively.
Hold it.
No debate without Mike, and this will have to close to be fair to everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry. But to basically, it sounds like using a relatively unproven technology. And we here in Seattle had a very similar debate along these lines with regards to, say, the monorail, which a lot of that was defeated largely because, again, the unproven technology. And it sounds to me like we're trying to solve this problem of getting people around. We have a proven technology, trains. We can use that, put up new lines, probably at a fraction of the cost of, say, the inevitable overruns of using a new technology.
Yeah, I think the monorail problem is more people didn't want to go from West Seattle to Ballard.
Actually, they did. They voted for it 3 times.
Yeah,
it was some business interests that didn't want it.
I hear you. But again, that's a proven technology. I mean, you have monorail trains you can go put up right now. If you go down to Vegas, if you look around the country and the world, I mean, there's plenty of monorail, that type of technology.
But they used the argument as unproven.
Well, no.
Okay, next question.
I'm sorry.
No. Next question. I want to make sure we get everyone some stuff in here.
Okay.
Yeah, you're.
Come on. Okay, so I actually have 2 questions for you, if that's okay. The first question is, it seems to me that there have been problems in the public transportation arena in getting very big ticket capital infrastructure heavy projects funded through the legislature. Mm-hmm. And I want to know what, if anything, you guys are doing towards looking for, basically accepting that this is perhaps a permanent problem and looking at transportation solutions that that are not intensive on doing big infrastructure projects like maglev and stuff like that. I mean, again, I think maglev is cool, but I'm looking at solutions where somebody's doing something very clever with what we already have.
I should have put up the video displays, which throw on the screen. People love it when you can watch the video. But 2 answers. Is it permanent? I have a good friend, Representative Fred Jarrett, out of the Bellevue area, who's actually our lead on transportation right now. And Fred can go back through all the history of the anti-highway movement, going back into the early '70s. To the failure to pass the bond way before my time to be able to bring the mass transit system in, and the money then went to Atlanta for the system that they have down there. So is it permanent? Well, it seems to be permanent, from what we already have experienced from the past 30, 40 years. My theory is I also don't consider maglev to be a capital intensive as many other projects. It's not like adding 2 lanes of highway through Seattle. I think there are different ways to make it less capital intensive compared to other types of transportation projects. For example, the right across the way, looking at your light rail going from downtown to the airport here, a maglev system would be much more light rail, much more flexible than the system that's currently being built for multi-billion dollars right out the door out here. So other things that we're doing on the transportation front, we're working all the different issues to make things more affordable, more effective. We're working at bus rapid transit systems to take peaking capacity off of our interstates, off of 405, 520 bridge. Those types of things are a good idea. We're looking at technology solutions with regards to metered ramps and different types of ideas. You're going to hear a lot in the upcoming years about value pricing for roads. And value pricing is simply a way to say solve congestion by making it too expensive for poor people to drive. But that's a different issue for a different day when we talk about how that actually works in terms of value pricing on freeways and tolling and everything. So lots of different things we're looking at to eke every amount of effectiveness out of our current highway system. But the truth is, if we continue to grow at the projected levels, people are still going to want to drive, so we got to beat the car somehow. And I don't like the idea of forcing people out of their automobile through congestion and high prices, but trying to find a way that lets them live a good lifestyle that they want. And I think we have the technology and the ability to do it if we have a big vision. And I think a lot of people don't believe we'll actually build projects. That's why they don't support a lot of the things you see coming out of Olympia. I always talk about orange cone accountability. People don't want to see a report. They want to see the orange cones go up, the project get built, orange cones come down, you can drive on your project. They aren't seeing that right now, and they see the massive time delays in all the projects that we currently have out there. they get very frustrated. And that's why I think one of the reasons why you don't see support from certain segments of the community.
Okay, I had another question, was just sort of apropos of this. A lot of
follow-up to this one?
actually, not really. So
Just to be fair, I'm going to be the mic thing. I have 4, 5, 6, 7, so whoever wants 8 later. 8 was there.
I just wanted to talk about 520, actually. You mentioned it. 520 right now is probably past its viable life already. It's going to have to be replaced. It's essentially being held together literally with baling wire. I don't know how many people know this, but they have cables running through the things, or the only thing holding it together right now. If those cables break, it sinks about that fast too. So the question is it going to be financially possible for us to replace it even with a putting tolls?
Yeah, anything's financially viable if you look at the price tag, get some federal dollars. We need to, right now, what's the current price tag? $4 billion on it or something? 3 point, depends on 4 lanes, 6 lanes, how they're going to do it, when they actually get around to doing the construction, whether you start the 520, if you consider just the bridge itself, or if you consider all the stuff from I-5 to 405 with the improvements needed there to make the bridge work, is that the total cost of the project? We have to work on some cost containment measures also to be able to get projects built on time. In Olympia, we have a problem right now. Basically, gas tax says, all the gas tax has to go to highway-related uses, 18th Amendment to the Constitution. We have entities in Olympia that don't want to build new lane miles. And so one of the ways to prevent new lane miles from being built is to drive the cost of projects up as much as possible. We're seeing that on 520 Bridge and other projects right now, where there are things that we could do to actually get a project built more cost effectively, but we don't see that happening. And still protect the environment and still make a quality project and still do the things we do, but there's no incentive right now to contain costs. There's no entity in Olympia currently advocating or lobbying for constraining the costs on projects down there. So it's frustrating. We look at the price. So can we do it? Yeah. I think when people start seeing that $10 toll, they're going to freak out, and then they're going to come and ask questions to the legislature. Well, how come you told me first off, here's this trust issue. I sit before you a person who has about 15% approval ratings if you look at the national polls. Any elected official, whether you're George Bush, the Democrat Congress, the Republican Congress, anybody, the only people that poll lower than politicians right now are HMOs. So,
by not much.
Yeah, not by much either. So we have a credibility problem when it comes to all these types of issues, and people are frustrated on both sides of the issue. So they want to see results, and we need to find a way to deliver results in a more cost-effective fashion to drive the cost down. The building industry, AGC, good people, a lot of big builders in my district, they come and tell me ways that they can do projects better, but at the end of the day, they're like, no matter what you tell me to build, Doug, we'll just build it. And for them, it's just a question of the money. For them, it's good to have these mega expensive projects. They don't have a desire to lower costs except for the fact they're good citizens. So we need to contain costs. Will we get it built? Yeah, we have to. There's no way that as elected officials you can simply let 520 go away and not replace it. The fact that we've gone this long without having a firm plan in place to actually get that accomplished, to me, is just mind-boggling.
So I'm going to go back to the train. I'm not necessarily into the technology, except I have 2 requirements. High speed. And I'm going to tell you why it's high speed for those of you in the room. I live in Eastern Washington, I own a home in Western Washington. I hop the Cascades like a little bird. Back and forth. I migrate a weird triangle between Portland, Seattle, and Spokane very regularly. I was a kid in the 70s. This train should have already been built between Spokane. I was promised when I was a kid I could walk out of my door, go to a bus, to a train station, work in downtown Seattle, and get back home for somewhat of a late dinner. Where I'd like to hear your know if you've done anything, because I haven't found it yet, is if we start making the I-5 corridor first, transportation, and then start doing some east-west, will this also alleviate housing prices for residents who are in the central Puget Sound, Seattle especially, to get them back out of a reasonable thing that if you earn an average income, you could actually afford an average house? Will it affect it, or at least stop it from continuing this exponential slide which is going on?
I don't know how you contain the cost of housing in the greater King County area. And the demand is just so incredibly high right now. And land has been taken off the market for certain reasons, some good reasons and some, whatever the reason may be, but people want to live here and they're going to move here, and that's going to drive the cost of housing. I think the train system, one of the other problems about the train system is people are concerned that if you put in place a high-speed train that allows you to live in Moses Lake or in Cascadia and work in downtown Seattle, people are very worried about the growth patterns, which could drive the cost of housing down in King County if you have other options. So I think was where you were going with the question. And drive it up, or just give people options. I think Moses Lake has plenty of places to grow and to build housing. People are worried about, say, if this train system came through like the Nooksack Valley where I live, Everson and those places up there, they're very concerned about it. People could live in Everson and work in downtown Seattle. Well, shoot, you would see a lot of people taking that option. So that drives growth pressures in different parts of the state if you had that option. If you had a half-hour commute from that area to downtown Seattle, I think you would see the growth patterns change significantly. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? It's just a different thing. And we have to be able to plan for it and make it work, and that's the key.
I think it's part of the.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the discussion when we look at this, and that's all. So thank you.
Oh, and Spokane is the key place to start, I think, with this type of technology. The Seattle area is jaded, you know, from sound transit, from the monorail boats, to all the different things. I mean, you come at them with a new system, it's like you got to be careful. They're going to be throwing stuff at you. They don't want to hear about it. They just want to see something actually get built, and that's why you see this thing out the window with regards to the light rail connecting downtown out towards the airport. But so I think Spokane area is great because they're looking at a way to make their growth work, but they haven't already gone through the trials and tribulations of multiple votes on systems that never even get off the ground, but you spend millions of dollars on. That was a great video they made for the monorail.
It seems to me that one of the things that was a problem for the monorail happening was that, you know, we made all these plans and then we had to fund it, and so we set up this bond thing that's going to end up costing, you know, a lot more than it had been originally talked about because of all the interest we got to pay on the bonds. Why don't we start some funding now for whatever project we end up working on, right? And have a pool of funds that's building interest in the other direction until it gets used.
It'll get used for something else.
Yeah, it's kind of like that mythical lockbox at the federal level when it comes to Social Security, you know, we're going to put it in the lockbox and not use it. From a political perspective, it's very difficult to put money away into a project that you may or may not see. I think and also you just talk to the general public. I think if you say, here's a plan, we can go and invest in it, you sell them on something, saying it might not come to completion for 10, 12 years, then they might be willing to start saving money. That's the way our highway system used to be before we bonded everything. You take your gas tax, you put it into reserve, and you spend it as you have projects. But I think it's difficult with the public to go and say that we're going to take money away from roads or anything and put it into this lockbox over here with the hope that we'll build it in the future. It's a difficult sell with the general public, I think.
I guess the thing that I have issue with that is just, I mean, there are always going to be transportation needs forever.
Oh, yeah.
So set up a fund for them.
Yeah, and we have that right now. The motor vehicle fund technically is that, where we have a 16-year plan right now going out into the future where you're building the road projects, doing your infrastructure updates on that stuff. So technically there is one with a dedicated revenue stream right now to roads. For a train system, it would have to be a different way, but I think you need to have a vision you can sell with the public before you can go and say we're going to put this together. The people can see the vision on the freeway system. They can see the need for a new 520. They can see the need for the VIDE. Like they can see the need in my area in Bellingham. We have congestion in Bellingham on I-5 now for enhancements up there in terms of how you do it. Vancouver, Washington, huge growth problems on their freeway, huge traffic congestion issues there. Spokane, same thing on I-90 and the north-south freeway. Yeah. You know, in terms of places, and that's another great example where that was done in the past for Spokane with special Category C funds, where they took a portion of the state gas tax and dedicated it to 4 specific projects going into the future, put it into the pot, and then only one of those projects ever got built. And of course, that one was in Seattle. But Spokane never really saw any of the money out of these special Category C, so that model has been used. But again, even then they had 4 projects specifically dedicated for it, and you still couldn't get it to fruition through the legislative process in Olympia. So,
was that too specific, maybe?
I don't know if too specific. It was good projects, needed projects, and the only one that got any money out of it, I think, was Highway 18 at the end of the day. So, out of the 4 that were named in that thing. But I think it's a good idea to put the money away and dedicate it as you spend it coming into the future, especially with new technologies. Yes, sir.
Comment for a question. I have on a post on my blog that we should round up everybody who voted against the light rail on 77-1 and take them to the middle of the 520 bridge and throw them in the lake. It's totally altered this place. But my question is, what is your solution for the Alaskan Way Viaduct?
Tear it out, forget it.
That was a question to the entire group, right? Not specifically.
Welcome to the hot question.
We need the round table discussion at this point.
One question, is anyone here armed? Okay, he can answer it.
You know, what's sad about it is we don't have a decision on that whole thing yet. Whether it's replace it in place, you know, go with the tunnel option, look for a big bridge, like I call the Dorian Monson solution, you know, the big bridge over the bay, hooking in. What should be done? You need to have a way that can replace some capacity needs. You can't just tear it down. What it would do to I-5 would be incredible. I'm surprised we didn't pursue some of the, looking at the deep bore tunnel option a bit more intensively than what they've currently looked at instead of the cut and cover in place issue on the tunnel option. And again, looking at ways to control costs. If I was to sit back and say, here's a way I can solve this problem, what I would have done if I was mayor of Seattle or governor of the state of Washington at that time would have been to go to the business community and said, here I have a product. And what's the product we have? It's basically waterfront property that you have the viaduct on currently. So what if we went to the building community and went with a public-private partnership and said, I will essentially deed over to you with restraints and restrictions and mandated parks and X, Y, and Z, the stuff above the new tunnel. And you can build condos on it, you can build parks on it, and you have multi-billion dollars worth of real estate investment potential on that particular area if they will pay for a new tunnel underneath that area to replace the viaduct with a tunnel. I think the development community would be very excited about the potential for a massive increase in waterfront property with them having control over it.
But that's no public space like in Vancouver or in Portland. They have all this public space on the waterfront. That's the problem. I worked in my first...
Actually, if it's a follow-up to that, we're around. I'm trying to make sure everyone gets one question.
Just to follow up on that quickly, the way you handle that is there the potential even to say that we're going to tear down this thing and just put in a green space above a tunnel?
That seems to be the consensus of the Seattle residents, I believe.
The cost,
we should tear the viaduct down and put it on surface streets, and then that's
Surface Street wouldn't even give you the access that you're talking about in terms of parks and the connection between the downtown area and their waterfront. It's a difficult waterfront connection in general. It's not like the Vancouver around Stanley Park. It's not like San Diego or different areas. The way I see it going out to the pier area to the working waterfront is different than some of the things you'll see in some of the other communities. And Vancouver is a great example where they have connected their waterfront much more effectively. I was in Chicago last week, where Chicago did it great, but that goes back 100 years, where they left all of the waterfront undeveloped, and now it's in public use and public access. Again, a different type of shoreline. But I think if you did it properly with the development community, it's not just carte blanche. You don't just give them the keys and say, go build, whatever you want. You put in place restrictions and parks and connections and trails to hook your downtown into that area. That would have been a potential option, I think, to bring people in. One of the problems in Washington State, and transportation in particular, is this fear of the private sector for some reason. And there's just this massive desire to control everything, down to the last, lug nut out of Olympia. Tacoma Narrows Bridge is a great example where we broke our contract with a private company that was going to come and build the bridge, moved it over to state control. At the end of the day, due to delays and due to different types of cost overruns, you're seeing the tolls actually probably going to be slightly higher than they would have been if we just would have built the original project using, I forget the name of the corporation now, multinational American.
Bechtel?
Not Bechtel, but they formed a Washington subsidiary just to, was it United Infrastructure Washington? Might have been. Anyway, that's not relevant.
Let's move on to this question. He's been very patient.
So it seems to me that transportation issues require significant, hard, long-term thinking and planning, and the political process, doesn't really mesh with that very well, given our political timelines typically. I think Puget Sound is probably compared to the rest of the country one of the areas where long-term thinking is more accepted among the voting population than other places. But my question is, given that it's hard no matter what, given that we're going to have these problems and no matter what, and the longer we wait, the bigger they get. Let's take Maglev as the example. What are the steps from here to there? How do we take the correct steps to create the right amount of social buy-in to be able to do that long-term vision and be able to invest in it?
My vision of the steps is you have to have legislative buy-off, number one, working with the federal government on dollars. Any significant new transportation system is going to require federal dollars. And so the legislation that was introduced by Representative Dickerson and myself basically put in place the process to begin the planning with the federal government and at the state level to look at it. And the number one thing is you have to analyze your problem. And so at the state level, I view our issue at the state level as moving people between regions. And for that reason, my mission is not so much how do I move people throughout Seattle, and not even so much how do I move people from Bellevue to Seattle using bus rapid transit and different types of local ground-based transit systems. But when I look at it from my statewide perspective, I look at how I move people between regions in effective fashion. And starting with that goal, you can build trunk lines of support that then can be bridged off of to serve other communities. And again, I use the example of the, I keep pointing out the window because right out the window we can see the light rail project. And looking at something like that, which really doesn't solve many of the problems that we have out there, it doesn't offer a good alternative to many people in terms of how they move about unless you happen to live on the line, and it's the best thing in the entire world. If you have a condo next to the line and able to go back and forth, that's great. And that's really one of the main purposes of that rail system is to drive growth patterns around a rail system, which is great for the developers that have the property right next to it. For everybody else who's moving between regions, it's not really a good tool. So I think it's identification of the goals, and then working to get legislation passed to focus the state on a goal and an objective. And we do have long-range vision in Washington State. The only problem is we also have this is how do you move past this? We all always suffer from study stagnation, where we can't get to the decision point. We have a very difficult time pulling the trigger to get projects actually built. And I would say the single most difficult thing to do is to build a road in a built-out environment. And so I take I-5 or 405 and to expand that, make it wider, or to build any type of new infrastructure. I always had this conversation with the monorail people when they came down to visit, because I go over the permitting process with them. And say, you guys better be on board with my permit streamlining bill, because you'll never be able to get your project built. And they go, oh, no, we can do that. Not understanding the Corps of Engineers didn't really care at the time whether it was a bridge for cars or a bridge for monorail coming over, from Ballard across the cut there into downtown Seattle. So you have to handle that, and then once you make the decision, you have to have in place a process to actually get it built. I always say to build a transportation project in Washington, I don't care what it is, you need three things. You need to have a transportation project that people of Washington State support. You need to have political will to be able to build a project, and you need to have the funds to be able to get the project built. You need those three things. You need to have the political will to do it, and a permitting process that allows you to get it built in a timely fashion, and the funds to get it accomplished. And we've had a hard time in Washington State selling people on a vision because we are so caught up in the car versus transit debate, but I think those things are not mutually exclusive. It just depends on what you're trying to serve. Transit from Bellevue to Seattle makes incredible sense. Transit from, bus transit, or even the light rail, whatever it is, that doesn't make sense for me traveling from Ferndale to Olympia or me traveling from Seattle to Spokane. So what are my options we can put in place to help people in that fashion? So I think identifying our goals and putting out a vision and a real plan, and then do the people support it or don't they support it? At the end of the day, if the people don't support it, it's not going to get built anyway.
Kind of a follow-on to that question. Obviously, getting people from region to region is important for growth statewide, but within a given region, I think we're having a far bigger problem of who cares if people can get to the Seattle area if once they get there, they're stuck in gridlock. I have a 12-mile commute and quite often spend more than 3 hours a day in my car. Buses don't even help that. What ideas do you have for even within a given region getting people around?
That's the PRT.
Well, you can use, personal rapid transit is a system that you could put into place, which is maglev compatible also to move you on systems around different areas. And so when you go to the plans are numerous around the country. When you take a look at down LA, they got great plans in place for more of the inner city stuff. Most of the stuff right now in maglev has been focused in on inner city more than the personal rapid transit stuff. There's no operating personal rapid transit outside of Disneyland. That actually is in a city environment. So you do have the.
So there's one coming online in London, right?
I did not know that.
Heathrow, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's an option for moving people around. Again, it's the convenience factor, because no matter what we do, and this is a problem we have because we're a wealthy nation, and people have the luxury of being able to own an automobile and operate it. And with that comes, you look at your daily schedule. I mean, the other thing we see is fewer and fewer people go to a manufacturing base and put in 8 hours and then go home to their house. This doesn't happen that way anymore. Now it's you have 5 points that you go through in a basic working day for many people. It's not just the soccer moms picking the kids up from school and taking them to whatever it is and then getting them home for dinner at some point. It's people's work day moves them around in different fashions throughout an area, so we have to find a way to give them an option. Bus rapid transit, when implemented, I think could be a first step towards that. I think personal rapid transit systems have the potential to get there, but that's a huge psychological shift also when you take a look at that particular thing.
Tell me what a personal rapid transit system looks like. I've not heard this before.
It looks like if people move...
Rephrase the question so people understand.
Yeah, what does a personal rapid transit system look like? Basically, it looks like a monorail track, basically, with maglev trains put on top of it, but instead of moving a train that holds 300 people, it moves a car that holds 6 people. And your theory on this is it's high frequency, multiple destinations, flexible track that's able to move you around in a community without having to build, again, my sound transit example, a monstrous concrete structure to move it on. Since it's so light, the energy source is not contained on the train, it's in the track, moving it back and forth. You can have a lightweight system that's flexible and it's movable around a given area to get something accomplished and built with multiple stops, flexibility, the ability to call up cars, the ability to use computerized systems to say, well, we know that we have 500 people trying to move from here to here after work, and we have 2,000 people trying to move from here to here. You can target your systems and move the cars around, all computerized. You have a camera up top. You move into it, there's no operator in it. One of the great questions is how do you control people's activities within a car, no matter what it is.
Broadcasted on local television.
Yeah, so you have cameras there, you're being televised while you're in it, but different types of things, With this type of transit system, and one of the things technology brings to it is it does allow the ability to move the operator out of the car and be controlled from a remote point. And with that, how do you have the control mechanisms over? You don't have a cab driver. It's not like in movies, with the Johnny Cab, it's just there's nothing in there. What was that movie? That was... yeah, thank you, yeah. So that's the theory when it comes to the personal rapid transit system.
Do you feel it can actually be built within our lifetimes, though?
Boy, I'm 38 years old now. I'm focused in on the inner city ones right now, because I think the other one, yeah, it can. Of course it can. If there's a will and if there's a sell, and the people come around to say, yeah, we think it'd be a good idea. The technology is there. We could build it, with the new materials that are online right now. We can build it in a lightweight fashion. But again, particularly in Seattle, you go and talk to a Seattle City Council person about a personal rapid transit system, and good golly, they're going to throw you out the door because they are so up to here with what they're currently doing with their heavy rail. That's why it's so important. You take a look at these major investments and the commitment on that. It really shapes the future for so many years. And that's why it was frustrating that conversation wasn't brought into it more back when they were going through the whole process earlier.
Okay, so Seattle is kind of a hub of the information worker, which, for the most part, most of us don't actually need to go into work, but, there's sort of like this cultural notion of you go to work, you sit at your computer, and then you go home. And it's not entirely, it's not entirely true, but what is the city or the government or the state doing to sort of emphasize the notion of like trip reduction or to flexible schedules more so that you don't have as many people on the roads during rush hour? What are we doing to sort of make what we currently have work as opposed to having a big ticket project?
Yeah. You're talking transportation, we call it TDM, transportation demand management, where you try to contain the demand on your existing infrastructure to be able to move people around on what you currently have. The tough one is, while there's lots of people in the information technology world that could be doing it from home, we're still a social entity, and it's very difficult to break that habit of people going into work. Some areas you can't. You have to go in and work, obviously. Whether you're in banking or government or education, people want to have that across the counter contact with those particular people. Moving hours around, one of the conversations we've had for state and government employees, start their day earlier, finish it later, start it later, finish it later, whatever it is, to take the demand and move it around during the course of the day. The state level, the city level, they probably have flex hours now. I'd imagine the city of Seattle, and in many of their offices where you can work 4 days a week, do your 410s instead of your 5/8s. We do that at the state level with some of our staff to try to free up some road time. If you're doing the 410s, it does move your commute time around, but it does make you less accessible as an office. So my office in Olympia, if there's nobody there on Friday, that makes the constituents upset. And so they want to have We're also working on ways to do remote offices for legislators, for example. So my legislative assistant could work out of home, because basically she needs a computer and a phone line to be able to do 95% of her work during the day, and then she can forward it on to the rest of my staff that handles the particular issues, drafts of legislation, those types of things. So we're working on that to allow at the state level and encouraging other companies to do the same. You're seeing it. One of the things that's happened, though, with the technology age and the ability to work from home and to telecommute 2 days a week or 3 days a week, you see people who all of a sudden realize, well, shoot, I can live out in Carnation then. Because if I only got to drive it 3 days a week, then hey, that's all of a sudden doable. If I had to do it every day of the week, then I'd want to live in closer. So one of the unforeseen consequences of some of the telecommuting is it allows people to actually live in more remote places, but they're still using the road system 3 times a week going into work, you know, back and forth. So that's one of the interesting aspects of that too. And
telecommunication also requires an infrastructure that we don't have for those places.
Those places are underdeveloped.
Give you an idea, you could not work a call center job in Republic or OMAC because the broadband isn't there.
Oh.
The southeastern Washington's pretty good, Spokane's fairly good, central Puget Sound, even around the Vancouver area, when you get out central Vancouver, it does not exist. So people who are looking for expanding the rural economies and getting into more diversity, I think that's where you're going to. It's not there yet.
Oh,
we haven't done it, even with some of this. For people who are not aware, some of the sensitizing allow power companies to bring in internet and data access have not totally worked. Not everyone's like Bremerton, who wired themselves 6-way silly, unfortunately. But
I think we're going to see some of that drive. It's a time factor and a demand factor. Moses Lake, with what's happening in Quincy right now, I think, from my understanding, a lot of capacity being driven into that region up there. So hopefully it'll broaden out. I mean, Republic, even if we brought it in, could you really convince people to move to Republic?
Yes, there are people who leave the Bay Area. It's the reason why 7 of my houses have sold to Bay Area people in Spokane. Yes, you can convince people, because at some point, some people get tired of that stuff.
I love Republic.
I'm only picking on Republic. I'm only picking on Republic because it's a good sample, because a lot of people under there.
Yeah.
Republic is way up north. You have to cross the highest pass to get to it. Ponderay, way up.
North Central.
Oh my God.
But you're a Republican, right?
I love Republic. It's a cool town, old mining town. They got a bunch of. Yeah, Okanagan Highlands. It's cool. Tonasco's a nice town.
This gentleman has got a question. I think he's the only person who hasn't yet, so we should get his in.
How is the legislature incorporating bicycles into city planning, crosstown traffic, and also there's a lot of initiative for taking old rail systems and converting them into bike trails, and is that a good compensation?
Now let me hit the last one first, which is taking old rail lines and convert to trails. That's a very controversial one right now. Burlington Northern is selling its track just east, well, in Bellevue actually. King County wants to buy it and turn it into a trail. There's also a push to say, well, we need to keep this capacity to be able to move people around. So say we did want a maglev system X, Y, or Z, which would be compatible with the trail, by the way, because it takes up such a smaller footprint than does your traditional wheels on steel rail system. Do we take that and convert it over into that trail? It's a good idea. I don't mind that idea, but we also make sure we maintain those right-of-way capacities. Like I say, in a built-out environment, to go out and get that right-of-way again, to be able to put in a rail system, whether it's moving freight or moving people, would be prohibitively expensive. So to give those away would be very difficult. And of course, during the committee hearings on that particular rail line, the trails people said, oh, well, we would be happy to give it up in the future for, to turn it back into a rail system, yeah. Once you have it, people aren't going to give that up. How do we incorporate bicycles into it? I think that's an important aspect of what we need to be doing, encouraging local cities and communities to build it into their planning network. It gives me a chance to plug a piece of legislation I'm working on for next year, actually. I'm working on a public trails district piece of legislation. Currently at public facilities districts, and essentially the way that works is a local community, in this series a county, would be able to keep a portion of its sales tax locally as a 50% match for construction and right-of-way acquisition for off-road dedicated trail systems. So not wide shoulders, but actual, dedicated things just to biking and walking to connect their communities together, with the emphasis being on connecting urban growth areas together with trails. So your theory being I can ride my bicycle, or your Segway, I suppose, whatever it would be, something not too motorized. To connect these cities together, so I really have an option of how you move about between the different regions. And if biking's for you, then this would be a way to do it. So that's a bill I'm working on for next year. It's not an incredibly expensive piece of legislation. For Whatcom County, which is the one I know the best just off the top of my head, is about $2 million a year. in state money, which could then be matched by, would have to be matched by $2 million a year in local money. But it's a big chunk when you start talking about getting this type of thing accomplished. So I think that's a huge thing. The thing about bike paths, this is amazing. The most conservative part of Washington State is Linden, Washington, in my district. You know, these people are great. I love them. They went out and did a survey of what their citizens most wanted. And their citizens most wanted new bike paths. You know, out of all the things, you know, in their entire unsolicited, it wasn't go pick out of this list, but just give me the thing you would like to see in our community. And they were willing to pay for it. They want to make that investment in their community. So you see, even in the most conservative areas, they want to make those types of investments. And foot for foot, there is no park that's more utilized than a trail. People love trails, and they love the ability to be able to go and use them. I think there's a great opportunity for it. My quick personal story, not that people care about my personal stories, but I biked from Glasgow to Vienna on my honeymoon. And basically going from Glasgow to Vienna, you can do almost that entire trip on dedicated bike paths going through Europe. You know.
Of course, the one under the English Channel is...
Yeah, that's fair. You know, you get a place where you can park it. You know what I mean. But you can do it. It's amazing. They actually say I didn't try. You can actually bike all the way to Italy.
He swam.
On dedicated bike paths. And so not saying we're going to build that system right now, but people want that. And that's one of the things I think that we can work with our communities to get to the people, to give them the things that they desire. And that's one they really, really are very interested in. Again, conservative, liberal, moderates, they all love that idea.
To let everyone know, as I pass the mic around, we've approximately got 7 minutes with the representative before we have to close down the session.
I just want to say too, I guess, responding to the earlier thing, I would like to have funds that are dedicated specifically to public transport of some sort, but not necessarily to a specific project.
Gotcha.
So
we currently have that in Washington State. One of the great myths, you know, is that we spend more on roads than we do on transit. And depending on how you slice the pie, it's about 50-50 right now, what we spend on roads compared to what we spend on transit statewide. Transit's an expensive operation right now, particularly your operating side of it, which is where most of your costs go. And then if you try to somehow factor in the roads that are built with gas tax dollars that also serve your bus rapid transit system, then the number becomes even more fluid in terms of how you actually calculate it. So we do make a huge investment in public transportation right now in Washington. My concern is it's not always the most cost-effective means of making that investment. One of the other things on bus rapid transit, for example, I know Senator Dan McDonald made this proposal about 6 years ago, saying just make buses free. And so that'd be your single, easiest way to increase your ridership and move people around the county, would be just make it free, because there's that barrier. How do I get on? And it's an amazing thing. You think about mental barriers to doing certain things. That's why casinos, the slot machines, the most popular thing in the world, because there's no barrier to participation. You know, buses right now, a barrier to participation is: do I have the right amount of change? Do I, if I go on there, will I hold the whole bus up if I give them a dollar bill and it doesn't, you know? How do you make it all work? And so that was a very, you know, I thought, innovative idea. It'd be more cost effective than some of the other ideas that have been pursued, and would move more people more cost effectively throughout the region. Just thinking for myself, if I'm in downtown Seattle and a bus comes by, I know I don't have to worry about pain. I take that barrier out of the way, I'd be much more likely to jump on it and ride it from downtown to the Safeco field or whatever, or move around that fashion. So
you can within downtown Seattle.
Oh, there you go.
But not the Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
You have the right free zone.
The right seat,
Just
exactly.
right downtown, just right downtown.
So
Increase the gas tax to $5 a gallon, I guarantee you'll have more people riding the bus.
within the technology community that's represented here at Mind Camp, there's a lot of knowledge about what we call agile development, or working with very fast cycle prototyping, and a lot of interaction with the people who are going to end up using our products and services along the way, so that they are influencing the design process at every step of the way, and we're iterating, those versions of what it might look like very fast. So I'm wondering how that kind of knowledge and understanding could apply to a transportation process. For example, it might be fun to partner with a consortium of technology companies to create virtual models of different options and iterate on those models so that everybody can see them and give input on them, and see their changes being incorporated in sort of a near real-time fashion.
Yep, I hear exactly what you're saying. And we're always trying, is that, I'm in the people business, you're in sales, you're in creation, to a certain degree we're in sales also in the political world, because we want to get people on board and get them supporting it. The difference is, when you're out there with the product and you're test marketing and you're bringing people in to work on it, usually there's no one who is diametrically opposed to the proposal that you're working on. You know what I mean? So to use that process, for example, with the 520 bridge, I have a camp who would like to sink it, and replace it with water taxis. And then you have, of course, the people that want the 8-lane bridge. So that's the one problem we have on that process when it comes to transportation in this political arena, is if I open it up, which we try to do, if you open up to all opinions, you can't get to a complete consensus, because I can't keep the people happy that want to sink it, if I'm talking to the people who want to build the roads. That's the one area where it gets a bit different. You understand what I'm saying on that? In
a process like this, you end up seeing, the fringe opinions show up as fringe opinions, and they're there, but you can see that they're fringe.
Yeah, I hear you. And there are, very good point. We're always trying to work on that to be able to get that planning process done and to involve people more earlier in the process. And we have started doing that. We did a thing called Transportation Permit Efficiency and Accountability Committee. And one of the good things to come out of that whole process was this concept of we start our consulting and bringing people together earlier in the process so you can avoid the problems further down the road. So we're trying on that to get that done. 520 Bridge, many people have said we've been doing that for 10 years in terms of bringing people together. Then political leaders change, the bunnies change, and then it all starts over again. So that's where it gets frustrating.
This is going to have to be a quick question. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up here so 1 minute question and answer is the time limit here.
Yep.
How about giving a price break, sales tax price break for hybrid buyers?
Yeah, we have that in place right now to a certain degree. Another way we can take a look at doing it is if we were to get rid of the sales tax, or give a sales tax credit back on people who purchase hybrids or high fuel efficiency cars, whether they're hybrid or not, and if they trade in their current automobile.
It doesn't deal with congestion at all, though.
That's not a congestion issue, but we're dealing with a lot of different issues in transportation. One is congestion, one is how I get newer, cleaner cars on the road. And by the way, here's my thing to end with, maybe if we're ending, is we're going to restructure our entire way of paying for transportation projects in the next 10 years. As people start getting 50, 60, 75, 100 miles a gallon, which is coming, or if they move over to hydrogen. How do I tax hydrogen? How do I tax you plugging in your car at your home outlet? I can't move all of the gas tax burden on to people who need to drive a truck for their work living. I can't get a hybrid that can haul my stuff, deliver cement, X, Y, and Z. And so you're going to have to find a way to tax people differently, whether that's tolling, whether it's per mile, whatever it is. We're going to see a massive change in how we pay for our highway system. And it's going to be interesting when we get to that point. Technology is going to play a huge part and how we take care of that in the coming years. Things are exciting in the transportation world. Technology is amazing and what's happening right now. And what we need to do is really create that level playing field that brings in competition to allow things to happen. In the tech world, somebody can stop me if this is a terrible comparison of X, Y, or Z, because it probably did happen. But if you go back 25 years and say this is the system that we're going to use and no other systems are allowed, what would have happened to the technology world at that stage? You see that a lot right now in transportation and other areas of the government becoming too involved, and it's a detriment to innovation and creation. And we have to look at ways to break down the barriers in the technology world that will allow people to innovate and do the things that I think are coming, and we're going to see them in the next 10 years, whether it's cellulose ethanol, which would be a huge thing if we can make the jump to that technology, so all of a sudden I'm burning field stubble instead of corn. How do I break down the barriers to using sugar instead of using corn-based? We currently have massive trade barriers in place to prevent the sugar from coming into our country to convert it into ethanol to protect the beet farmers and different people around the country. So lots of things that we can do. I just want to say I appreciate the chance to come and be here with you folks today. It's a great opportunity, and we'll just keep pushing on ideas and trying to find bold ideas. I think if we can do that, the people are looking for ways to innovate, be creative, and bring forward bold solutions to the issues that we face.
I'd like to thank you for coming to Mind Camp, and I'd like to thank everyone for participating in questions. It's a great sign when you have to pull the mic away from people and say, I'm sorry, take it no, and make sure I show a little empathy as I do it. But we're going to be having an email list, and we was coupled to let people communicate with the representatives to get ideas, because there are a lot of good things. You brought bicycles, you brought there are some things which come in, and also at the same time the representatives have to work, because the legal process does not work, and the government process as fast as we do. But the world's changing around, and we're already suffering from the problems that we haven't moved fast enough in some areas. And again, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it.